Banking Committee's Economic Policy Subcommittee. I want to thank Senator Kennedy for working with me and my staff to make this a successful hearing. I believe that this may be the first hearing about childcare in the history of the Banking Committee. But really, this shouldn't be surprising. We are here to talk about our economy and economic recovery, and childcare is a critical part of how our economic recovery plays out and what our economy will look like going forward. As we look ahead to our post-pandemic economy, childcare is essential for helping parents get back to work. A national survey found that nearly 20% of working parents left the workforce or reduced their hours solely due to a lack of childcare. And 26% of women who became unemployed during the pandemic attributed this to a lack of childcare. In order for parents to return to work, they need safe, reliable, and affordable childcare. Without it, many parents will find that they are struggling to interview for jobs, let alone to hold down a job or advance their careers. A strong economic recovery depends on solving this problem. High-quality child care and early learning is about parents' jobs, but it is also about early learning for children. A mountain of evidence shows that high-quality early learning supports important brain development, helps children get ready for school, and leads to higher earnings and better outcomes throughout a child's life. For every dollar we invest in high-quality early childhood programs, study after study shows that we get a return of somewhere between $4 and $9 back on down the line. New research has found that spending on programs that support children's health and well-being reduce medical costs, improve college attendance, and lead to higher earnings and higher tax payments. In other words, these programs pay for themselves by the time the children become adults. This isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a smart investment that will yield returns for our country's future. And finally, we need to address the fact that childcare providers are seriously underpaid. Today, childcare workers earn an average of just $12 an hour. Childcare providers are some of our nation's most important early teachers, but our nation has undervalued the work they do for far too long. 95% of childcare providers are women, and they are disproportionately women of color. Ensuring that childcare jobs are good jobs with fair pay and benefits, and that jobs that will support families while doing this essential work will permit childcare workers to stay in the field, to build up expertise, and to improve the care they offer to our children. For generations, we have told parents that when it comes to finding quality, affordable childcare, they're on their own. That's bad for parents, bad for babies, and bad for childcare workers. There's a reason that childcare was front and center in President Biden's American Families Plan. This is critical infrastructure that makes all other work possible. I'm very concerned about the bipartisan framework released last week that didn't include a word, not one word, about childcare. An infrastructure plan that doesn't include childcare does not address the challenges facing families in Massachusetts or anywhere else around the country. Now is not the time to abandon what President Biden has proposed. Now is the time to expand it. I'm fighting for a $700 billion federal investment to make sure that every single family who needs it can find safe, affordable childcare. That's good for parents, it's good for children, it's good for providers, and it's good for our whole economy. So that's why we're here today, to understand the problem and to figure out how to address the challenges facing families and build a stronger economy that works for all of us. Our first witness, Fatima Goss-Graves, is the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, where she has spent her career fighting to advance opportunities for women and girls. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Betsy Stevenson, a professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan. Dr. Stevenson has served on the Council of Economic Advisors as an advisor on social policy and labor market issues and as chief economist at the Department of Labor. We're lucky to be joined today by Bernadette Nago, a founder of Trusted Care, a family child care program in West Haven, Connecticut. As a family child care provider, Ms. Nago operates her program 24 hours a day. Think about that. And is committed to quality, equity, accessibility, and community support. After Ms. Nago, we'll hear from Abby McCloskey, the founder and principal of McCloskey Policy, LLC, a research and consulting firm serving businesses and political leaders across the country. And finally, we are joined by Rachel Gressler, a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, whose work focuses on retirement and labor policies, as well as workplace and family issues. The pandemic has exposed the challenges that have faced working families and child care providers for decades. We have an historic opportunity right now to make sure that every family that needs it can find and afford child care, and that every child care provider earns a living wage with good benefits. So I want to thank all our witnesses for joining us today. I look forward to hearing your testimony. There's going to be a vote at 3 o'clock. I'm going to step out during that vote, and Senator Smith is going to take over the gavel and run the hearing while I vote. And with that, I'd like to start with Ms. Goss-Graves and recognize you for 5 minutes for your testimony, please.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Warren and Ranking Member Kennedy and all of the distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Fatima Goss-Graves, and I'm President and CEO at the National Women's Law Center. And for both Chair Warren and Senator Smith, we are so grateful for your leadership on child care, and we are grateful to Congress for the American Rescue Plan and the 2020 COVID relief packages, which together provided a $50 billion amount in relief funding that saved the child care sector from collapse. But if we can make no mistake, the investment in child care cannot end there. For the child care and early learning sector, the pandemic has really laid bare and really exacerbated deep inequities in our child care system that have long been baked in. That families are required to pay sums that are unaffordable, that early educators are being paid poverty-level wages, and too many communities across the country are faced with situations where there are not enough child care workers and there are insufficient facilities to support the demand. And since the start of the pandemic, the decline in mothers' labor force participation has been nearly double that of fathers. And research shows that COVID has led mothers of young children in particular to reduce their work hours by as many as 4 to 5 times more than fathers. And while these numbers are cause for alarm, what is actually more surprising, I think, is that we aren't seeing an even larger reduction in labor force participation yet. And that's because throughout history, mothers have found workarounds by accepting jobs that pay lower wages, workarounds by putting off educational opportunities to grow in their careers and to provide for their family, forgoing other necessities for their families and for themselves because the cost of childcare eats up a third or more of their income, all while working themselves to the bone to care for their families. And as parents are desperately seeking childcare in this moment, we risk not only undermining employment, undermining economic growth in this country, but also undermining children's long-term development. When we invest in children starting at birth, it yields long-term positive outcomes for their health, for their education options, for their employment options. And from birth to age 3, we know that children's brains are making more than 1 million neural connections per second, and that is influenced greatly by caregivers. So what we need is universal and reliable and affordable, high-quality childcare so that all parents, but also the mostly women and women of color in particular who have been barely hanging on in this pandemic can get and can keep jobs, and that the workers, the mostly women workforce, the mostly women of color workforce can do the critical work of care that we all value so much for pay that actually matches that work. We're seeking and think we need a $700 billion investment in direct spending to ensure that we can meet this moment. Meet a moment that no family would pay more than 7% of their income, so that child care providers can be paid on parity with kindergarten teachers, and that there can be more child care slots available for families in this country, and that we can get 2.3 million good paying jobs, nearly all of which would be held likely by women. And this investment will also enable parents and especially mothers to participate in the labor force and have greater financial security. We have a new study out with Columbia University that shows that increasing the number of women with young children working full-time, increasing this investment would increase the number of women with young children working full-time by 17%. And for women without a college degree, it's 31%. So I will just conclude with just a couple of final thoughts, and that is pre-COVID, our status quo was unsustainable. We knew that. It was unsustainable. It left families behind. It left women workers in a bind. We can do the work that demonstrates that childcare is infrastructure in this country. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goss-Graves. That's very helpful. Dr. Stevenson is joining us by WebEx. You are recognized for 5 minutes. There's that long pause. Dr. Stevenson, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you for the invitation to speak today about childcare. I'm an economist who has spent much of the past 3 decades trying to better understand women's employment, American families, and the porous boundaries between our personal lives and our work lives. These porous boundaries were completely shredded during the pandemic as tens of millions of people began to work from home for the first time, along with their children who lost access to in-person school and childcare. My research has shown that policy choices shape the constraints that people face and therefore their employment and family choices. The choices you make now about childcare will shape the U.S. macroeconomy for decades to come by influencing who returns to work, what types of jobs parents take, and what kinds of promotion paths parents are able to access. It's not just women. Men's employment choices are also shaped by access to childcare. In 2014, the survey found that 49% of parents said that at some point they had passed up a job because it conflicted with family obligations. In a recent survey that I've been running just over the past month in conjunction with RIWI, we found that childcare responsibilities during the COVID-19 crisis impacted the employment of 59% of parents. Only 41% of parents said childcare had not affected their job. Many cut their work hours, turned down promotions, changed jobs for more flexibility, paused training or education, or quit jobs entirely. These impacts were reported by men and women almost in equal number, a fact that reflects the shift towards greater, although not complete, equality in the home. Now, let me emphasize that the pandemic did highlight the fact that women continue to bear disproportionate responsibility for caregiving within families, and the COVID crisis impacted women more than men in many ways. The first factor was the nature of the recession itself. This was our very first ever service sector driven recession. And between February 2020 and May 2020, women lost 13 million jobs compared to 9 million jobs lost by men. However, over the last several months of recovery, the gap has been reversing as jobs for women have expanded faster than those by men. This is important because it points to the role that women are playing in the economy and how essential they are. The second factor was, of course, the closing of schools and childcare. More than 2/3 of children live in households in which all parents work. The pandemic made salient the many roles that schools play. K through 12 education is typically thought of as a source of education for children and an investment in the next generation. It is. It is also a source of childcare for many families who are able to work for pay during the roughly 6 hours that their children are being taught and cared for by professional educators provided for through their tax dollars. Childcare for younger children serves a very similar dual purpose. Early childhood educators can improve outcomes for children by engaging in developmentally appropriate curriculum-based activities. They also provide crucial care for children in households in which all parents work. And the third factor is related to changes in family life. And I really want to highlight this because it's often overlooked. Mothers of young children were more likely to be in the labor force at the time of the pandemic than in any time in the past. In 2019, mothers of children 6 years old and younger had the highest labor force participation from any period in history. These challenges that women faced highlight our failure to adapt childcare, workplace flexibility, and workplace parental leave policies as women have entered the workforce and gained experience, training, and education that has made them an essential part of the economy. Women are no longer the secondary earners, as economists used to refer to them, able to step back from work whenever the household demanded it. Today, more than 40% of mothers are the primary earner for their family, earning at least half of total household income. I want to highlight in my last few minutes just really the important role that childcare plays. Childcare and education has more in common to the banking system than you may suspect. It's the backbone of our future economy because it invests in and develops our human capital. While women have done this labor for little or no pay, do not underestimate its value. Human talent through these investments, and it's ultimately human ingenuity that fuels our economic growth. Early childhood education does three things. It provides childcare that allows parents to work, thereby raising household income. It develops skills in children that lead to higher lifetime earnings, and it supports the equal investments in children necessary for a competitive market economy to reach its potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stevenson. Appreciate your being here. And now, Ms. Ngo, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am Benedetta Ngo. I own a child care program in Connecticut. My program runs 24 hours to take care of the varied needs of workers, parents. I was raised in Cameroon by a single mom who had little education but wanted me to go to school, wanted me to learn, and that helped me along the line to acquire education. I did go to school, just like we're looking forward to our kids to go to school. I earned a degree in law. I earned a degree in postgraduate diploma in women's law. I earned a degree in counseling and an MBA. What does this tell me? That early childhood education is very important today, tomorrow, and forever. If we have to change our economy, we have to invest in early childhood education. Before 2010, I used to be an adjunct professor at the University of Bridgeport here in Connecticut. I had the opportunity to teach older kids. But when I had my own kids, I had to switch lane and decided to teach young kids. I saw something that needs to be done. If we don't invest, if we don't bank in our kids, then we are creating a problem down the line. And trusting our kids with what they need for the future is like doing what? Doing something we call prevention is better than cure. Everything that the kids need at this age is very helpful because it will take down the cost of every other thing that when we grow older, we will need. So investing in early childhood, to me, is very, very crucial. I want to emphasize one thing, that early childhood education, daycare in particular, helps everybody. The multiplier effect of me keeping that child and the mom going out there to work will have a long and lasting benefits to the economy as a whole. It's very important for us to realize that the impact of early childhood does not only end with the kid that we are taking care of, the parent, but it also affects the general economy. If I don't take care of the kids, you will not be there working. The senators will not be doing their job. The doctors will not be doing their job. So the effect of that has a multiplier effect everywhere within our economy, now and in the future. Before the pandemic hit, it was tough being a daycare provider. The pandemic hit us so hard. Unfortunately, we were quarantined twice. How did that affect our program? We had to close down. How did that affect other workers? They were unable to go out and work for about 2 weeks, if not more, because of what was going on. I am submitting that daycare is very, very important. Our country has a child care problem that needs to be resolved. If we don't pay attention to the crisis that childcare is facing, that problem is going to multiply down the line. If we are growing the next generations of presidents, CEOs, engineers, and doctors, we need to give them what they need at this age, because this age is the time that we build the foundation. If we fail to build the foundation properly, then what we are leaving out there will be disastrous. It is easier to repair the structure up there, and it is very difficult and costly to repair the foundation. Child care education, we build the foundation. We build the brains of the kids that we care for, and we need to be rewarded as such. We do not only build the brains of the kids that we take care of, we do much more than that. We listen to their parents when they share their challenges back at home, when they share their challenges back at work. We have all of this going on within our daycare programs, and the remunerations we get are far less than what we put out there in terms of services, in terms of the quality and our skills. So I am proposing that we pass this bill to be able to fund childcare programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ngo. I very much appreciate your being here. Ms. Gressler, you are now recognized by WebEx for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As a wife and a mom of 6 young kids, ranging in age from 3 to 12, I've spent the last 13 years navigating the same thing that millions of parents have done in facing the decisions to determine what work and childcare is best for them. And if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that there's no single work-family balance nor childcare setting that's best for everyone. These decisions aren't easy, and I know I continually question whether we're doing the right thing. Only through the ability to carve my own pathway and achieve a flexible balance have I become more comfortable and confident in the choices that we've made. Families need to be free to pursue what's best for them and not what politicians, government programs, or societal norms tell them to do. I'm actually optimistic that the changes brought on by the pandemic could benefit families through more flexible and accommodating work options. Women have already overcome what were initially disproportionate employment impacts, and a recent study actually found that childcare struggles is no longer weighing on employment declines. That means that heavily subsidized childcare and universal pre-K won't solve the current employment problems. but they would push more parents into the workforce. And that's one of their goals, to prevent parents from having to give up income in order to stay home with kids. Allegedly, government programs are great for kids, producing 7-for-1 returns. But are politicians really telling me that my children's future value to society will be multitudes higher if other people pay for my children to attend full-time, government-directed childcare than if I or my husband give up some income to stay home with them, or if we choose any other combination of non-government childcare? It's wrong to discount the enormous value of parents investing time in their children. And moreover, there's actually zero evidence that large-scale government programs could mimic the high returns of tiny boutique programs that served disadvantaged children a half-century ago. Present-day programs like Head Start and Tennessee's voluntary pre-K program have provided little or no lasting gains, and they've had some consequences. Moreover, only 18% of families prefer to have both parents working and their kids attending paid childcare. And those families are disproportionately wealthy and affluent. Nudging families away from their preferences could backfire, as Quebec's $5 per day subsidized childcare program showed. It did increase work among young moms, and it shifted a lot of kids from family care to government care. But researchers found striking evidence that children's health and behaviors were worse off. They had higher crime rates as teenagers, and families experienced more hostility and less consistent parenting. There's also the reality that government childcare will drive up costs and limit choices. Requirements like extremely low child-to-teacher ratios and college degrees for childcare providers are a big reason behind DC's $43,000 price tag for 2 kids attending childcare. Small family and religious providers are usually less expensive and more flexible, but government subsidies and directives could actually crowd them out. Already, onerous government regulations contributed to a 52% decline in the number of small family providers since 2005. And while childcare is inherently expensive, there are ways that policymakers can help families obtain the care they need at a cost they can afford. My written testimony provides more details, but some helpful actions include letting families keep more of their own money, reducing regulations that don't contribute to improved quality and safety, giving more parents more choices with the public childcare programs that are out there, eliminating barriers to employer-provided childcare, letting workers choose to be independent workers, and enabling more flexible childcare settings. For example, Head Start costs as much as full-time childcare, but often only provides half as many hours. Families should be able to take that money to a provider that works better for them. If I watch my friends' kids one afternoon per week, I shouldn't have to convert my home into a licensed childcare facility. If a couple of moms want to form a co-op, they shouldn't have to become employees and employers of one another. And daycare shouldn't have to throw out expensive materials when a simple duct tape fix would do the trick. But apparently duct tape harbors germs, so it's not allowed. Caring for children is something that humans have done since the dawn of time, and childcare is not unique to COVID-19 or even to 21st century America. But as more Americans desire increasingly flexible work, easing childcare restrictions could help more families meet their desires. The solution to a more equitable economy is to empower parents instead of politicians to make the choices that are best for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will now hear from Ms. Abby McCloskey, who will be joining us via WebEx.
Thank you, Senator. Chair Warren, Ranking Member Kennedy, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The nature of work and family has changed significantly in recent decades. The majority of parents of young children are now in the labor force, and mothers are the primary bread earner in 40% of families. This has created tensions around work and care that both the government and markets have failed to adequately address. Most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic revealed just how intertwined care is with the economy, providing a unique opportunity to rethink the childcare landscape. As policymakers weigh new reforms, I'd like to put forward 5 principles to target our childcare investment. Number 1, the benefits of early childhood programs are most pronounced for disadvantaged families. We should focus our efforts here. Nobel Prize winning economist James Heckman has found a 7 to 13% annual return on early childhood development programs for disadvantaged children. Moreover, the children of those who attended such programs also have exhibited improved economic outcomes. This suggests that targeted investment in early childhood care could improve intergenerational upward mobility for at-risk communities. In contrast, research on broader programs such as universal childcare and universal pre-K is mixed, with some studies showing positive effects and others showing fading or negative ones. More research is needed before justifying a universal program. Number 2, we should increase parents' choices for care providers. Child care needs and values vary widely. As such, policymakers should seek to create more options for care rather than one-size-fits-all public programs. This could be done through an expansion of the existing Child Independent Care Tax Credit, which in essence is a school choice program for early childhood care. Parents can use the credit to send their children to center-based care, in-home care, a church program, preschool, language program, all of which could be full-time, part-time, or something in between. This would allow for a proliferation of different kinds of care providers in response to what parents want, instead of in response to what Washington wants. Moreover, making the credit refundable would benefit low-income households for whom childcare is a barrier to work and high-quality care options are most out of reach. Number 3, we need to account for existing programs and make sure that new spending is paid for. The federal debt is at historic levels, and that's before any infrastructure package. We must be judicious with our spending priorities and pay-fors. We are not starting from scratch in the childcare space. New programs should seek to rationalize the existing landscape of government programs and subsidies to reduce waste and overlap. Additionally, new programs should be accompanied by a review of existing spending instead of relying wholly on higher taxes. This spending review should be comprehensive and not limited to existing childcare programs. This is because in the next decade, federal spending on adults over the age of 65 will grow to more than half of all spending, while the share of spending on children will shrink to 7%. Number 4, we should make it easier for parents to spend time with infants. While much of the discussion on childcare focuses on care outside the home, care inside the home from parents is vitally important. Yet the status quo makes it very difficult for parents to spend this critical time with their children, even in the early weeks of life. One study has found that 1 in 4 women return to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. A federal paid parental leave policy would change this and is associated with reduced rates of neonatal fatalities, increased involvement from fathers, and higher wages and reduced reliance on welfare for mothers. Unlike broader paid leave packages, its cost is modest and contained. Moreover, boosting wages for parents through economic growth and the Earned Income Tax Credit would provide more flexibility to be at home if that's what they chose to do. Number 5, we should seek to bring down the costs of care. One contributor to high childcare costs is the decline in the supply of providers, and in particular, in-home providers. This is in part due to burdensome regulation. A care package should include federal incentives for states to review and streamline their child care regulations wherever possible. Moreover, we should seek to increase the number of care providers and opportunities for their career advancement in a way that's sustainable. For example, multiple states have begun to implement apprenticeship programs for early childhood educators, providing them with opportunities for increased skills and higher pay. These efforts have been supported by the Trump White House, by the Center for American Progress, and by the Bipartisan Policy Center. We should seek to expand these efforts. Having worked with leaders across the political spectrum in my career, I am convinced that there are targeted reforms that would deliver significant benefits to American families and to the economy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of our panelists for your testimony, and I am going to now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning while Senator Warren is voting. So I start from the place that child care is a family and an economic imperative, and I think that today's hearing is so important. And I thank my colleague, my great colleagues, Chair Warren, for holding it, because I don't think our economy will work, nor will it return to normal, if we don't have safe, affordable, high-quality childcare and early education options. And I think that we know that high-quality early education closes opportunity gaps for children. This is what we know. And this is, of course, as several of you have pointed out, this is about equity for children and families. I've learned from speaking with childcare providers and early education providers across the gamut in Minnesota that the whole business model for childcare and early learning in our country is just not working. It's not working for families, for businesses, for providers themselves, who often describe this work as a labor of love, and certainly not a place where they're making a lot of money. And it's not working for the vast majority of the providers themselves, who has been pointed out are most often women and women of color. So let me just ask a couple of questions on this topic. And I'm going to start with Ms. Goss-Graves, if I may. You mentioned in your testimony that childcare is infrastructure. And this, of course, the word infrastructure has been thrown around a lot over the last couple of months here in Washington. I've joined Chair Warren and my colleagues, several of my colleagues, in urging big investments in childcare because I agree that childcare is the work that makes all other work possible. But could you just say a little bit more, Ms. Goss-Graves, about what does it mean to you when you say that childcare is infrastructure? And what do you say to those who say that infrastructure is really just about roads and bridges and broadband? Not that that isn't important too.
I actually think when you think about roads, infrastructure, broadband, you understand why childcare is infrastructure. Childcare is the care and the work that makes all other work possible. It is something that connects families with jobs. Mm-hmm. And it is the work that ensures that entire sectors can actually work. And one of the reasons it was so fragile going into the pandemic and we watched it basically collapse is because we've been treating it too much like an individual problem. But if we actually invest over the long term, like it is infrastructure, like it is a public good foundational for our economy and our families, then we have an opportunity for something very different going forward.
I think the infrastructure word sometimes sounds kind of hard and impersonal, but it gets, in my mind, exactly at what you're talking about, which is the kind of fundamental pieces that we need in place for families to work, for businesses to work, for our economy to work. And I'll tell you, this is what I hear also from business owners in Minnesota, especially in many rural parts of my state, where there is such a shortage of childcare and therefore a real challenge with fathers and mothers being able to work. And to be clear, they work because they have to work, because that's how they pay the bills. Let me ask a question, if I could, of Professor Stevenson. In February of 2021, the Minneapolis Fed reported that labor force participation among moms of young children had dropped 11% due to the pandemic. And what the Fed found was that early on, moms and dads left the workforce to care for their kids at home at roughly equal levels. But while nearly all dads went back to work, too often moms weren't able to. So, Dr. Stevens, could I ask you, what does it mean for our economy and for society in general when women are pushed out of the labor force because of a lack of access to childcare?
Yes, thank you for that question. And we know that a lot of women were pushed to make a choice that's different than what they would have made because they didn't have any other options. Women have been getting more education than men and and have closed experience gaps with men. And what this means is that they are fundamental to our economy. They're some of our most experienced, talented workers. And when they stay home, we lose that. They lose the opportunity to have their career continue to develop. One of my biggest concerns is that even as their children grow, we'll have a hard time reintegrating women back into the labor force. If you look since the last recession, the 2008 recession, 2/3 of the job growth went to women. So women have been driving, if you think back to that, what we called sort of the miracle 10 years of growth, where month after month, employers tried to hire more people. And we thought, ultimately, they're going to run out of people, right? That's why the Fed started to pull back so early. But women responded to the call and they entered the labor force at higher rates. that Kansas City Fed also found that women led the resurgence in prime age labor force that occurred between 2015 and 2019. So if you think about where we were in 2019, if we had women stay back, if they hadn't led that growth, we wouldn't have had much of the growth we had between 2015 and 2019. To put that in perspective, while a lot of people talk about, was it the tax cuts? Was it regulation? What helped us grow between 2010 and 2019? It was women.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to ask, I'm over my time, but I'm going to ask one more question to give Senator Warnock a chance to get settled in before I turn to him. And I'd like to ask a question of Ms. Nago, if I may. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. I so value hearing from people who are doing the work on the ground as you are, and I'm so amazed at how you can organize your effort 24 hours a day. That's incredible. So I've introduced legislation called the Child Care Supply Improvement Act, which is specifically designed to help smaller child care providers. And I'm very excited about this legislation. I'm glad to have the support of Senator Warren and Wyden and Brown and Casey. And what the bill would do is to permanently increase annual funding for the child care entitlement to states to $10 billion a year, and also to invest $5 billion per year to help improve child care supply and quality and affordability. So, Ms. Nago, could you just take a minute to tell us, before I turn to Senator Warnock, when you were starting up your organization, what obstacles did you face getting started, and how can we help people like you who are interested in doing this work? How can we help you better get started?
When I was starting my business, I faced a lot of obstacles, not limited to what I'm going to state. No trainings. I needed more trainings to be able to reach out to meet the needs of the kid. I needed equipments. I needed help with licensing. How can I get licensing? How can I get support for that to be done? I needed some startup grants to be able to buy some of the basic tools and equipment and toys that I need for my daycare. I needed help with trying to make my premises helpful. For example, if I had lead in the house, I was told they have to come and check if you had lead in the house. And I'm taxed so much money for that to be done. You want to be sure that plumbing is good, lighting is good. You want to be sure that everything that regulation requires, you meet it. If you don't meet the standards stated by licensing, then you cannot start your daycare program.
Thank you.
What we will need is funding to help us with that. So those obstacles were there, but I see a great improvement with all these programs.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. I am going to hand the gavel back to Senator Warren so I can go vote, and I believe Senator Warnock might be next.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Smith. I appreciate your taking over the duties of the presiding officer. Senator Warnock, you're recognized to ask your questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Warren, for organizing this conversation called Child Care and Equitable Post-Pandemic Economy. Even before the coronavirus pandemic, child care industry faced unique challenges. Child care was unaffordable for many families. At the same time, child care workers were underpaid. In 2020, child care work ranked among the bottom 2% by salary before the pandemic, with educators, with all of their training, making just over $12 an hour. In Georgia, workers in unsubsidized centers earned an average of $10.14 an hour. People were taking care of our children and educating them. These challenges disproportionately affect women, particularly Black and brown women who make up the bulk of the child care workforce. During the pandemic, child care providers faced record low enrollment forcing providers to reduce costs by paying even lower wages or laying off the staff. Ms. Graves, can you talk about the importance of paying early educators who are educating our children during that critical time of brain development a livable wage, and the impact that this will have on our ability to fill these critical jobs with well-qualified people?
So thank you, Senator Warnock, for that question. I think it's one of our nation's travesties, the wages that child care workers are paid. And what it means is that we are fixing the problem of child care by basically making a largely Black and brown women workforce bear the brunt and the cost of it. The solution really is to pay them parity to what we already pay elementary kindergarten teachers. So we already know and have an understanding of what it looks like to pay them fairly. And we're all hurting from it. It's not just those the workers and their families. We are all hurting from it because it means that that workforce is less stable. And as there is a surge of people trying to return to work and needing more child care, they are struggling to have enough workers who are willing to work there for poverty wages when there may be an opportunity to work for a few dollars an hour more somewhere else.
Right, right. And Ms. Ngo, in your experience as an unsubsidized child care provider, what would federal investments in child care do for your center? How would that improve the service you offer to children, the kind of talent you're able to attract, and the support you can provide for these families?
Thank you so much. Childcare is very important in our community. What I am looking at is, what is childcare? It may be if we understand the job we do, the job I do as a childcare provider, we will be able to look at the remuneration and see and ask ourselves the question, is that remuneration up to what we do, what we offer? As a family childcare provider, I am I'm constructing the brains of kids, just like infrastructure we build. So every single day, what are we doing? We are building the brains of early kids, trying to make sure that by the time they become of age, they are ready. What do? We support them as they grow. We support their physical development. We support their creative development. We support their cognitive development. We support their social and emotional development. We are building the foundation for the kids that will be here tomorrow to run our nation. We are building the foundation for our nation. If we fail to build this foundation correctly, what are we going to produce? We are going to produce leaders that are not capable of doing the job tomorrow. So it's like I indicated earlier, if we have funding, we will be able to do our job properly. What are we going to do? We will be able to provide them with quality education. We will be able to help them understand the things that they need to do at this age. I watch kids that are between the ages of 6 weeks up to the ages of 10. This time, I have a child that is 18 months old. This fall within the critical period of building the child's brain. If I fail to do what I need to do, sometimes because of lack of resources or because the parents cannot bring the kids to my daycare consistently because this week they cannot afford to pay their out-of-pocket resources, what happens? That child gets services that are not sustainable. It doesn't help the child, it doesn't help me, it doesn't help our economy. If government subsidize family child care program, if they remunerate us for our skills, they remunerate us for our time, they remunerate us for all the things that we do. We do not only watch the kids, we also listen to their parents, what they struggle with. If the government can subsidize our programs, we will be able to continuously providing quality education for these young brains.
Thank you, Ms. Ingo. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm 1 minute over, and I'm going to beg the chair for one more minute. You mentioned the economy, and I'd like to ask Dr. Stevenson, because I hail from the state of Georgia where the average family pays 60% of their income to cover the cost of childcare for 2 children. I have 2 children, 2 small preschool children, so I can think about the impact that must have on families. 60% of their income to cover the cost of 2 children. Dr. Stevenson, if Congress invested what it should in high-quality child care, how could this actually benefit the broader economy, even for folks who don't have children? I think when people hear subsidies, they think of this as some kind of government giveaway, but is there an argument to be made for how this would actually strengthen the economy?
Yes, thank you for that question. Absolutely, because government subsidies for childcare will allow more families to afford high quality early childhood education, which is exactly what you just heard about, how it builds brains and it makes children more productive as adults. Research has taken a look at why so few kids get access to high quality childcare. There are a lot of different arrangements out there, but what drives people's choices? It's what they can afford. There's research that has found that the childcare market's quality problems reflect not parents' desire, but their ability to afford it. That parents would spend more if they could. And in fact, that's exactly what we see. High-income parents are spending more. They spend a lot on early childhood education, on childcare, and investing in their children. And that's creating an inequality in adulthood that then is exacerbated and grows and grows. So what we need, if we want an economy that can compete on a level playing field, that can get the most out of all of our unique individuals' talents, we need to invest in all our children equally. And that's why subsidizing early childhood education will accomplish that, by making sure that more children's, the parents and the families of more children can afford the high quality investments that you've been hearing about.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Those are important questions. Thank you, Senator Warnock. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Ms. Graves, a follow-on to the question with respect to better pay is broader. It's collective bargaining rights, not just pay, but working hours, professional training, all these things. Would that improve child care in the country, in your view?
There's no question that the ability to bargain, the ability to form a union and advocate collectively could be transformative for care workers more broadly. One of the really tough things about our long history of care work is that they were shut out of many important parts of our labor laws and protections. And what you have seen in a few places is an opportunity for care workers to come together. That happened over the last year in California with great success, where they could bargain collectively for wages. So that's a thing that would also help. But the truth of the matter is, we keep coming back to the math problem that families really can't afford to pay more, and workers should not have to take less or even maintain the very low wages they're paid.
Thank you. Professor Stevenson, following on that comment by Ms. Graves, there's a market failure here when you have families that can't afford it, and yet the workers are significantly underpaid. The market is not working. So what do we have to do in a couple of steps?
Yes, it is absolutely a market failure. And it's very similar to the kinds of problems we have in K through 12 education. If we were to ask parents to out of pocket pay for 100% of their children's education, what we would find is some parents simply wouldn't be able to afford it. And that is, we decided long ago that we were going to ensure that children got education in the primary school, that all children got access to education. Well, what we've learned since is actually those brain developments start early on, and we need to be providing that education earlier. You know, what an economist would say is, what's the market failure? Well, you know, it would be great if people could borrow the money they needed to make the investments and then pay it off over the course of their lifetime as they earned more as adults. That's exactly what taxes are. People should be getting invested in through tax dollars as children, and when they go to work as adults, they'll pay it back in the taxes they pay out of their higher earnings from those investments.
Well, thank you very much. By the way, thank you so much for your help on WorkShare. When we were developing that concept, your insights were incredibly useful, and again, thank you. My time, you may accept the economum. I think that's the phrase. Okay, let the record show a nodding head.
Yeah,
I got the nodding head.
You got the nodding head. Okay, that's my smile. I just want to commend Ms. Nagel for her great work, and my time is expiring, but thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me thank the panel too, and I would yield back.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for convening this hearing. Thank you for your leadership on this issue and for working families across the country. And thank you to our panel for joining us today and sharing your expertise. When I was running for U.S. Senate and when I was elected, it was very clear to me that Georgia families expected change, and they expected Congress to invest in them, in working families in Georgia, in improving quality of life, investing in prosperity for working families in Georgia. And as soon as we got here, I was so pleased to join colleagues like the chair and Senator Reverend Warnock to get to work. And that's why today I'm proud to be able to announce to the people of Georgia that because of the American Rescue Plan Act, which we passed into law, working Georgians who as a couple make $150,000 per year or less, or as a single parent make $112,500 a year or less, will soon start to see $300 deposited directly into their bank accounts each month for every child they have under the age of 6, and $250 each month for every child aged 6 to 17 years of age. This expansion of a child tax credit is so important. And Ms. Graves, I'd like to ask you, what will be the impact of this expanded child tax credit and these monthly payments that working families will see on the ability of families to take care of their kids and also to get back into the workforce?
So there were many parts of the American Rescue Plan that brought me great joy, but the child tax credit and that investment in our lowest income families is one that just made me really proud of this Congress and our country. A big deal that 4 million families will be moved above the poverty line. So when we think about children in this country, that we did this in the midst of a pandemic that responded with that level of force is really exciting. And going forward, I think we will have learned a lesson about what it means to ensure that no one falls off a cliff, that our families can be secure, and that our children in particular can grow up with that sort of safety.
Thank you, Ms. Graves. And with my remaining time, I'd like to humbly invite each of you, beginning with you, Ms. Gressler, to offer the one recommendation for Congress that you think is most important that perhaps we haven't touched upon yet in this hearing today.
I think a lot of the solution going forward, when we look at the economic reality of childcare, it's expensive, but we don't want workers to be paid less. This is difficult. I would love for my kids' childcare providers to be paid $50 per hour, but then I can't afford to pay them that anymore. So it's a tough issue, and there are limits to how much we can make it affordable without just simply taking money from other workers and forcing them to be the ones to pay for it. But there are ways that we can reduce the costs that are out there now, and I see a big opportunity in being, smaller providers, whether it's in a church center or a friend down the street that just is a home with kids and decides to open up a childcare center or watch a few people. I think there's both added flexibility that could increase the number of providers and also reduced regulations that could bring down the costs. We heard from Bernadette about just, it goes on and on and on, but all the things to your physical structure that have to be done, the requirements about you can spray this antibiotic when somebody is there and you can't do this, you have to give these drinks at these hours, like down to the nitty gritty. There don't need to be that many regulations on providers because that just prevents them from coming into the market.
Thank you, Ms. Gressler. Ms. Graves?
Our child care system and our current law, the block grant, it builds in a lot of choice for families. Some families want family, friend, and neighbor care. Other families want center care. That is already baked in our system. What isn't baked in is the level of investment to ensure that there is the supply we need, the workforce availability, and that families can actually afford childcare that is high quality. And so the thing that I'm hoping to leave you all with is that we cannot miss this moment. We cannot miss this window with the visibility that we have had over the last year of what it means to have such a fragile childcare system.
Thank you, Ms. Graves, and thank you, Madam Chair. I yield.
Thank you very much, Senator Warnock. So, I'm sorry, Senator Ossoff.
We look pretty similar.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's down at that end of the dais, so it's good to see you. So I'm going to ask some questions now. I got a chance to do this. Even before the pandemic, half of all Americans lived in childcare deserts, areas where there simply aren't enough licensed childcare slots to meet family needs. We all know that COVID made this worse, forcing thousands of childcare providers to close their doors. For families, this means excruciating decisions. Do I spend an hour each day driving back and forth 2 towns over because that's the only place where there's an open slot? Do I depend on neighbors or relatives who have their own lives to worry about? Some parents are juggling it all themselves, hoping that the baby doesn't start crying while they're trying to do a job interview or do their work from home. Lack of affordable, high-quality childcare affects every aspect of our economy. And while it got a lot worse during the pandemic, it's been holding our economy back for decades. So, Dr. Stevenson, I was hoping maybe we could go through some of the data on this. What happened to women's workforce participation, say, from the 1970s to the 1990s, through the 1990s?
So between the 1970s and the late 1990s, women's labor force participation grew quite rapidly, going from 43% of women participating in 1970 to a peak of 60% in 1999.
Okay, so let's break this apart into pieces. Okay, so we have this sharply upward slope. Did that trend continue?
So that trend did not continue. In fact, it flattened out, and we saw women's labor force participation growth completely stall out, decline slightly, and then decline a lot in the 2008 recession. Although, as I mentioned previously, we saw a real resurgence in that participation rate starting around 2015.
Okay.
But it's also important to realize that male participation fell much faster than female participation.
So we have women's participation goes up sharply in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. It flattens in about 2000. Is that what happened in our peer countries like Canada? Did they see that same pattern of rise and then flattening?
No, in fact, the U.S. really led the world with the rapid rise in the 70s and 80s, and the rest of the world started catching up. And then the rest of the world added more sort of workplace supports for working families. They added workplace flexibility, subsidized high-quality childcare, paid parental leave. We saw female participation continue to rise in other OECD countries, and the result has been that the U.S. went from near the top of OECD countries in terms of female labor force participation to really around the bottom among 22 OECD more developed countries.
All right, so our peer countries kept growing female labor force participation and creating more support for that, more family-friendly policies, more childcare support, and so on. The United States did not, and we saw a flattening of women's labor force participation. What did that flattening of women's labor force participation mean for America's GDP?
Well, I think the best way to see that is actually to look and see what did it mean in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. The U.S. pre-pandemic economy was roughly 15% larger than it would have been if women were employed at the same rate and worked the same number of hours that they did in 1970. So then think about, we got 15% more GDP because of the growth in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then it stopped. So there are lots of estimates over how much bigger our GDP would have been if in the 2000s and the 2010s women had continued working. If you go up towards, if you think about us adding the kinds of policies that other OECD countries would have added, some estimates suggest that female labor force participation, which would have been about 6 percentage points higher. If you think about something like that, that's certainly more economic growth than something like tax cuts for corporations have ever generated.
All right, and I understand that McKinsey put out a report in which they put a dollar estimate on what would have happened, how much bigger our economy would have been if female labor force participation had continued. Are you familiar with that report? Do you remember the dollar figure on that?
Yes, I am. McKinsey's taken a look at, first of all, the entire globe and come up with really an enormous estimate. But my understanding is their estimate for the United States is $1.5 trillion increase in GDP if we had had that kind of continued growth in female labor force participation.
And I take it, let me ask, in your expert opinion, if we'd had universal child care, do you think that would have had an impact on women's labor force participation?
I absolutely do. A lot of women literally pay to work. In other words, what they spend on childcare is more than what they're bringing home after taxes. The reason they pay to work is because they know if they lose their foothold in the labor force, they're going to have an even harder time getting it back. But many women look at the idea of paying to work, being away from their children, and bringing home no financial benefits for their family as a result, and think, this isn't a sacrifice I want to make.
I really appreciate this. Without child care, millions of mothers just can't work. And holding these women out of the workforce harms them, it harms their families, but it also harms our whole economy. This is what it means to say that child care is infrastructure. It's part of the basic support we need so that everyone gets an opportunity to work and our economy is productive. This is our moment to act. You raised this point earlier, Ms. Gosgraves. The president has proposed a major expansion of child care and early childhood education. And when Congress acts on infrastructure, child care is not going to be left behind. So let me ask you, what size federal investment do you believe is needed to provide quality, affordable child care to every family that needs it?
So we think we need an investment of $700 billion. At that level, we can ensure that families don't have to pay more than 7% of their income for child care. At that level, we can ensure that child care providers are actually paid wages that are dignity wages akin to kindergarten teachers. And at that level, we can increase the supply so that we don't have this challenge of the child care deserts that are especially a problem in rural areas, and that there will be more supply in terms of facilities, but actually more workforce supply.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Just yesterday, I sent a letter to congressional leadership with the support of over 100 of my colleagues calling for a $700 billion investment in childcare. So let me ask you, Ms. Goss-Graves, some in Congress have argued that we should focus just on roads and bridges and then come back to a discussion about childcare later, if ever. What would be the impact on women if we leave childcare behind in our infrastructure package?
I just think that we don't have that choice. We cannot live women who have lost so many jobs in this economy, who have held together their families in this economy with work that is both invisible and barely made visible and certainly underpaid in this period. People are counting on Congress to deliver on childcare, and that is a short-term solution, but it is a long-term solution too. It goes to their long-term economic security, their ability to retire with dignity.
Yeah. So I really appreciate your testimony here. You know, I support investing in our roads and bridges and broadband internet. It's all important. But we have to invest in the kind of infrastructure that women need as well. As a young mother, I had a terrible time finding quality, affordable childcare, and twice I nearly quit school. I nearly lost my job because I couldn't manage childcare. If we don't get this done, my granddaughter is going to face the same kind of problem I faced, and that is simply wrong. We can't let that happen. The infrastructure train is leaving the station, and we cannot leave childcare behind. So, let me, if I can, I'm going to do a second round of questions here. I want to talk about another aspect of childcare that many of you have raised today, and I appreciate your raising it. We have two very different systems in our country for teaching our little ones. For 5 and 6-year-olds, of course, and for older kids, we have public schools. No matter where you live, no matter how much money you make, no matter whether you have a job, you can send your children to public school to learn, and you can do it for free. Now, why did public schools start at the age of 5 or 6? Well, mostly because back then nobody thought that children could learn anything earlier than that. And now, of course, we know that's not true, that early childhood experiences affect whether a child's ready for first grade, but they also affect that child all the way throughout childhood and into adulthood. For example, high-quality early childhood education is linked to better health in adulthood and reduced odds of substance abuse or arrest. Many experts point out that when we spend a nickel on our smallest learners, we save dollars down the line. But for the littlest kids, parents are on their own. Don't have an extra $10,000 or $15,000 a year to send your child to a high-quality early childhood program? Then you get to juggle between friends and relatives, or maybe just leave your job because child care costs more than you can earn. Dr. Stevenson, let me ask you, do these two separate systems make sense, given what the evidence says about the benefits of high-quality early care and high-quality early education for our children?
I believe if we were designing our education system today from scratch, we would absolutely be emphasizing early learning as a critical part of that education system. As you said, we didn't know back when we designed our education system that so much learning happens in the first 5 years. We now know that really does form the foundation upon which people develop and grow. But I really want to tie this back to, in the last century, our economic growth was completely driven by the fact that we educated workers more than any other country in the world. Mm-hmm. We are now not educating our citizens more than any other country in the world. We are behind on early childhood education. We're also behind on universities. And this failure to invest in people, it's ultimately going to hold our economy back.
Yeah. So I think the evidence is clear here that you're citing that high quality care helps all our children learn and grow. That now, in addition to Head Start, we do have a limited public program to help low-income parents get affordable care for their kids, funded primarily through the Child Care Development and Block Grant Program, CCDBG. But our public child care system works very, very differently from our public school system. Ms. Gosgraves, does every single parent qualify for help getting child care regardless of their income or work status under current law?
Oh, I wish that were so. It's really only the lowest income families that qualify. And by a family qualifying, what that means is there are many, many children who would benefit from being in an early childhood program who can't because her parents aren't eligible.
Okay, so not everyone qualifies. Let me ask you about the people who do qualify. If you're eligible for the program, can you just walk into a child care center and sign your child up?
Well, unfortunately, it's also not that easy. There is the work that you have to do to demonstrate that you're eligible, which ends up serving as a barrier for a lot of parents. On top of that, there are waiting lists, and processing all of this can mean that parents and families, they languish on wait lists for months.
You know, we don't make parents prove that they're working or that their income is low enough to be able to send their child to first grade. We don't put those children on waiting lists to get into second grade. We understand that education is beneficial for all kids, so we invest in it as a country. Early care and education should be the same. We need to make it available for all of our babies, regardless of how much money their parents earn or what kind of job they have. You know, we can't lose sight of why this matters. Ms. Nago, tell me about the children in your program. How do you see them grow and learn when they're with you?
Something. What I want to clarify is like I was misunderstood. When I talk about regulations, the question was, what obstacles were there when you wanted to start your program? And I listed some obstacles that are there. Having regulations in childcare is very, very important. They are the basis of trust. Health and safety are very, very vital in daycare. So I should not be mistaken to say that regulations are not required. They are required, and all we need support to help us implement those regulations. For parents to keep their kid with us, they need to trust us, and regulation build that trust because parents know that their kids are in a safe place. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And yes, go ahead.
Let me now answer your question. The kids I have in my daycare, I have kids in my daycare now that range from the ages of 18 months to 10 years. Those kids in my daycare have different personality. They have different health issues. They are at different level of development. I have kids that are shy. I have kids that are happy. I have kids that somehow struggle with their speech. We call them speech delay. We have kids that are just recovering from the pandemic and they are in a trauma. I have a kid, I will share two stories. One, I have a kid that the mom was pregnant and lost the pregnancy. And when the child was born, apparently the child lived for one day and died. And that child came to daycare, and all I watched the child do was trying to pick toys and make them look sad. A child that used to be a happy child, you see that child struggling with feeling sadness. I have the task, I have the job of recognizing what that child is going through and helping that child to recover, helping that child to deal with sadness. Today, I have a parent in my daycare who is making a little bit over $475 a week. She has 3 kids. The first child is 14, the second is 13, and the last one is 2 years old. That parent doesn't drive. That parent has to push that child in a stroller to my daycare every day and then go down straight to the bus station to take a bus to go to work. And sometimes you see that parent getting home tired. I am obliged when, like yesterday, it was raining. That parent, there was no way she's going to trek 30 minutes under the rain to come and pick up the child. She had to call me to find out if I can help pick her up from the bus stop. I had to go pick her up from the bus stop. I had to arrange for someone to take her from my daycare to drop her and the baby. Otherwise, they will be wet to their pants under the rain. That parent is just one of the so many different cases we go through on a day-to-day basis. When you ask me as a provider, as a parent, as a business owner, what is the role of childcare? I am submitting that childcare is a public service. Childcare is a public service. Childcare should be prioritized. If we do not prioritize childcare now, we are going to get down into what we call a big disaster later on. Like I earlier on indicated, the job we do is about infrastructure, building the brains of these young kids. If we fail to build these brains correctly, it's about teaching them those small first, we call them magic words. Thank you. No, I'm sorry. Helping them to build their personality, helping them to build character. If we fail to do this, what is going to happen down the line? These kids will be wayward one way or the other. What will it need to fix the situation? If we fail at this level, if we don't have the resources that we need to build our young kids so that by the time they become of age, they have what it takes, character, they have the skills, they can manage their emotions, they can integrate, they have the opportunities to learn and strive and fly like every other child. Down the line, we are going to have more problems. What I say is the play they do at daycare, play to me is a factory. It's a factory where the kids learn different things. And that's just what we are doing. I will take 1 more minute to say something.
So we're going to need to keep this short. We're a little over here.
Just the last minute. The one thing that I want us to know is that those kids that I'm watching, if I don't watch those kids, you and some of the senators will not go to work. If I don't sit here, if daycare providers, whether they are family-based, whether they are center-based providers, if they don't do this job, you will not be able to do your own job. Other people will be affected by that. If any morning I get up and say, oh, I'm feeling sick, I cannot work today, 5 parents will not go to work. What is the multiplier effect of those parents not going to work?
So thank you. This is really important, and the work you do is enormously valuable and important. You know, we now have decades of research showing how important these early childhood experiences are, and the children in your care are very lucky to have you. So we've talked about the impact of our underinvestment in childcare on our economy. We've talked about the importance of investing in high-quality early childhood education on our children and long-term on our economy. There's just one more issue I want to talk about before we leave, and we've already alluded to it today, but I want to go back to this again. Our nation for decades has underinvested in childcare, and childcare workers are among those that have been hit hardest by the pandemic. As of this April, the childcare industry had lost more than 150,000 jobs. That's 1 in every 7 jobs in the sector. Women of color have been disproportionately hurt, and many providers are still struggling to get by. As a society, we have not valued this work the way that we should. In 2020, the average pay for a childcare worker was only $12.24. That's at the average. Think about how people can make more money doing the checkout at McDonald's. So here's the first question, and I can ask this one of you, Ms. Go. Do you think that $12 an hour accurately reflects the value of the work you do for children and families? I think there's going to be a one-word answer here.
The answer is no. And
Yes.
my no, I want to defend my no, because when you pay me $1, what are you rewarding me for? You are equating what services that are only equals to $12. If doctors do take care of kids and they are paid so much, if teachers, grade 3 teachers, they do take care of kids, they are paid so much, they are building brains. I am handling the most delicate portion of that developmental goal, our children, and you think that I only deserve $12 when the same kid that I bring up to this level, I have done the most difficult job. When I do that job, I pass that child on to middle school, to pre-K school, they are paid more.
Yes.
Is
So,
that fair?
so
I
it's
think the
very
answer is no.
important work. Let me just ask, can you easily raise your fees so that the hourly wage goes up?
How can we raise our fees easily when the parents are struggling? I just narrated a story of this lady who makes $475 a week with 3 kids. How do I raise my fees to such a parent? When the pandemic hit, most parents were unable to even pay their out-of-pocket family fees. Now I had the decision to do what? To cancel out-of-pocket fees, suspended collecting those fees. I had too many things in my mind. If I send away these kids, these parents that I can't watch their kids for free, what will happen when they get subsidies and later on need my program and are able to pay? So my first answer is no, it's not possible to just raise fees.
So you have given us the illustration of how the childcare market is broken. The price of providing high-quality care at fair wages is so high that many parents are simply priced out of the market. Childcare providers can't offer more slots because they're worried that parents can't pay, which in turn creates more shortages. So can I just ask you, Dr. Stevenson, this looks like a market that's broken. I'm going to ask you to wrap up here. What should we be thinking about to make this market work better?
The market is broken, and it's broken because parents cannot be paying for the investments that need to happen when their children are young. These are things that should be paid for over a lifetime. And that's exactly what our policymakers, what our system is set up to do, which is to have Congress fund these investments in children, to have our government fund K through 12, to have our government fund early childhood education and childcare. And then our children will grow up to be able to be more productive, to earn more, to allow us to produce more. And that will actually make it so that we could raise more in revenue, more than enough to cover the cost of this. So it's incredibly important that we provide that subsidy and we take that burden off of parents who desperately want to see their children invested in.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stevenson, and thank you all who've been here today. I think you're exactly right. We do not ask parents to pay the full cost of first grade for their 6 or 7-year-old, and we should not ask parents to pay the full cost of educating and caring for a 2-year-old either. And this is exactly why I'm fighting for a $700 billion investment in childcare. After parents, childcare providers are some of children's most important teachers. We need to transform our childcare system to recognize the skill and the value of care workers. Expanding quality care would mean that providers can offer fair pay and benefits, and it would make it easier for families to be able to find quality care. You know, we have this opportunity. This is our moment. We are rebuilding America's infrastructure, and a core part of that is making sure that we make the investment in our next generation, in our children. We do that, and that lets mothers go back to work and fathers go back to work now. That helps our economy, and it helps our youngest Americans. We have to make sure that when we rebuild infrastructure in this country, that we create good middle-class jobs and that childcare providers are not left behind. So I want to thank all of our witnesses who are here today. I appreciate your providing testimony. For any senators who wish to submit questions for the record, those questions are due 1 week from today. That's Wednesday, June 30th. For our witnesses, you have 45 days to respond to any questions. And again, thank you all. I appreciate your being here. We have a chance to do something important. Thank you. This hearing is adjourned.